It is said that a picture can paint 1,000 words. The Calgary Holocaust survivors you see in this picture have so much to remember of parents, siblings, relatives, and friends that were. They remember the complex fabric of a life which was intertwined with the threads of love, laughter, and tears. Over the past 18 years, the Holocaust Symposium has made it possible for local survivors to reach out to an estimated 30,000 Calgary students. The annual symposium has been co-sponsored by the Calgary Board of Education, Calgary Catholic Board of Education, Calgary Jewish Center, Holocaust Remembrance Committee, University of Calgary, and Mount Royal College. When the symposium began at Mount Royal College, 300 to 400 students were hosted for a one-day session. Eventually, it was streamlined into a half-day experience with different schools attending on each of 3 mornings. It has since grown to accommodate as many as 2,400 students participating annually. Throughout the past 18 years, Mount Royal College has been an ardent supporter of the symposium, generously providing rooms and theaters, arranging for security as well as technical staff. Each survivor remembers the past and confronts the future with a burden of tormented memories. The narratives are difficult to listen to, but imagine how much more difficult they are to tell. The survivors, however, know that it is imperative to give voice to their memories. Their tireless commitment to Holocaust education is the most meaningful of memorials to all who perished. Through lectures and discussions, students who attend the symposium are taught about the horror that resulted when Germany embraced the Nazi ideology of Adolf Hitler and his final solution: the annihilation and extermination of the Jewish race. The students view the documentary film Genocide, which is based on actual German footage. They are then afforded the unique opportunity of small group encounters with the survivors, who relive their past in the telling of their stories and answer questions posed by the students. Survivors have come to be regarded as living witnesses. They are speaking for all those who were silenced by an unfathomable hatred. At the heart of the Holocaust Symposium is the personal eyewitness testimony of survivors who, year after year, come to share their personal stories with the students. Every Holocaust survivor's experience is distinctive and unique. Every time the survivors tell their stories, they are reminded of the enormous losses they endured, scars that never fully heal. The murder of brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, grandparents and other beloved family members and friends. The loss of their own childhoods as they were swept from their homes and forced into ghettos and heavy labor, concentration camps, and death marches. Do you still think about it? One student asked a survivor who barely escaped a death selection at Auschwitz. For many years, replies this survivor, he was frozen. Finally, he began to speak of his experiences in response to some well-publicized Holocaust deniers. Jim Keekstra, Malcolm Ross, and Ernst Sundell. When they began to make headlines here in Canada, many survivors couldn't bear to remain silent. They began to share their painful pasts in order to set the records straight. There is not much time left from that generation, one of the survivors solemnly reflects, remembering fellow survivors and symposium speakers who, in recent years, have passed away. Sessions with survivors are, by far, the most effective components of the symposia. One teacher refers to the smaller group sessions as awesome and enlightening. Each year, students and teachers leave wishing they could have spent more time with the survivors. Many of the survivors have wondered over the years why they were fortunate enough to have survived when so many of their loved ones were murdered. Because of surviving, you feel an obligation. We must have survived for a reason, says one woman, who is justifiably proud that she has made a difference in the lives of some students with whom she has shared the most painful details of her childhood, including the murder of her mother and sister and her own incarceration in 2 death camps. After hearing firsthand about survivors' experiences, many students realize the significance in learning about the Holocaust. It teaches them that they can choose to behave in ways that will lessen the likelihood of such events happening again. They discover that the Holocaust did not begin with the concentration camps, but was a long, slow process sown by anti-Semitism and racism. Students learn that the seeds of racism, left unchecked, can grow ominously out of control. The survivors have demonstrated the ability and tenacity to overcome tremendous adversity and their enduring stories have contributed to 18 years of Holocaust Symposium, a symbolic number in the Jewish faith that represents Chai, or life.
We won't live forever, and we are a living document. We are the memory and the voice of those people who had died and perished in such a brutal way. I was a 15-and-a-half-year-old youngster when the war broke out, and right away, of course, when the Nazis occupied Poland, it started right away with the Jewish people, you know, registering them. And there were curfews, and there was raids, and there was shooting, and there was forced labor, and armbands, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we were taken to a ghetto in 1941, in March 41, April 41. March 20th, we were given 10 days to move. And, of course, a ghetto is a designated area where only Jewish people were forced in. 30 people in our town, in a place where perhaps 3,000 poor area lived before the war. The result was we lived 8, 9, 10 people to a room with few facilities and so on. And before long there was epidemics, there were sicknesses, and people were starving, and so on and so forth. And then the deportation started. People were sent, 10,000 people. In 1942, on August 5th, 10,000 people were taken to Treblinka, amongst them 2 of my sisters, aged 14 and 16. 12 days later, on August 17th, 20,000 people, which almost liquidated the rest of the ghetto. My mother, my little 8-year-old sister, and my grandmother, 62, all 3 were taken to Treblinka. Never seen them again. And my father and I went to a labor camp, which later became a concentration camp. And in 44 was when the war, of course, started against the Nazi Germany, and the Russians were pushing westward. We were taken on a march. And for 3 days, 3.5 days, we marched 3,000 people, 120 kilometers, not a drink of water in the heat, July 26th it was, and slept in the fields, soup at night and a piece of bread during the day. And then there we stayed for 8 days, building trenches, because the Russians were on our tail, so to say. And from there we're taken to Auschwitz, where we underwent a selection, my father and I. And a lot of the 3,000 people, some were taken off to the gas chambers, and those who were still young and strong were taken on to Germany, to a concentration camp. And that's where we went to Germany, a place called Feigenenz. And we were there 8 months. My father died, as I said, 4 months before the war. I was liberated. I was more dead than alive. A month after, when I was taken to the hospital, we were liberated by the French. And when I was taken to the hospital, and helped up on the scale 30 days later, after much care and food, I weighed in at 33 kilo, which was 72 pounds. I was 21 years old, 5'9". So I was a skeleton, barely. I spent there from April 12th till April 12th, 1945, till January 48, I spent in the hospital, recovering.
My story is altogether different than any other stories. Because I come from a place where they did a different solution of getting rid of the Jewish people. It was different. We were in Ukraine. With us, they came, they killed us, and Schluss, and finished. We weren't in concentration camps. We were in the ghettos. They killed us one time they killed, then they came, we put us in the ghettos, we did the work, what we had to do for the town, then they come, and killed again. They dug out 3 massive graves, and they gathered us like cattle. And the funniest part, the people were standing at the site and they're watching. People from town dug the graves. 5,000 people in 3 massive graves. You know, I was 18 months in the woods, and who can say that you can't survive on vegetation? I survived on berries, I survived on mushrooms, I didn't get poisoned. 18 months I was I had typhoid. Where was it? That it's in the swamps. Where I was hiding was the swamps. You suck on we had the maple trees, so we sucked on in order to have something to drink, and we were infested with lice. It was scabs and lice, you name it, we had it. If you think he didn't accomplish to make us feel subhuman, we were subhuman. But we've got up above, and for some reason, we came up like from the ashes.
I was lucky to survive. Most of us didn't survive. I lost my parents and two brothers to the gas chambers because when I came in, I didn't believe what I seen, and then I seen people walking around like half dead, and that happened to us too. In a few months, we were the same. We were all the same, and it's hard to describe really, you know, or to believe unless you've been there. And every story is a little bit different, but roughly the same thing happened to most of the people. And some were lucky to survive. With help, I had help from a friend of mine who was come from my town. He was working in the SS shop. He was a shoemaker, and he once in a while gave me a piece of bread or a bowl of soup, and that helped. Most of the people where I went didn't survive because we weren't dressed. We had no shoes, just wooden shoes and clothes. We had a jacket and a pair of pants and a cap. And you go out in the winter, and it was cold, and you come in, and you get diarrhea. You didn't have enough food to nourishment, and most of them died.
Why this event is important? It's the most important thing for us, for all survivors, to remember. You shall never forget a thing, because we don't want that to happen in the future. I lived through Auschwitz 3 years. 3 years in agony, 3 years of hunger. I was beaten. I was a nobody. I had a number on my arm. I was stripped of the love of my mother. I don't know what love means. I don't remember my mother, my father, my siblings, sisters, brothers. They all disappeared in the fires. And I was staying in Auschwitz and breathing that air, what was coming from the crematoriums, full of ashes. How can I forget such a thing? I'm not telling a story. I'm telling my story. Mine, that's Frida's story. When I speak to children, I mean children, growing up children, they're 18-year-old, they're grade 12, and I can see with my own eyes tears, tears of sorrow, tears, they're crying, looking for Kleenex. Never mind the girls, they're more sentimental. The boys, the tough boys with the long hair, asking for a Kleenex and wiping their eyes with their sleeves. I know that I touched them. And as long as I can touch one child, I'm happy with the work I'm doing.
I'm doing this in order that it shouldn't be forgotten, so it wouldn't happen again. And I feel that if you forget history, history has a tendency of repeating itself. We call people like me the hidden children. I survived by being hidden by Gentile families. My father died in Auschwitz in a concentration camp, and since I was a French citizen, I was born in Paris, France, we were among the last ones to be picked up and sent to concentration camps. So my mother heard of a priest, Father Dvorkin, in Paris, who was involved in looking for Christian families who were willing to take risks and hide Jewish children. And Father Dvorkin found a family in Normandy, France, who took my brother and myself in. My family were 5 children. I'm the eldest of the 5. My other siblings were hidden in different places, which during the war I didn't know where they were. And so, thank God we survived, except for my father who died in Auschwitz.
girl said to me, started to cry. And I said, what's the problem? She said, my boyfriend left me. And, you know, my parents don't understand that. And I'm very unhappy, and I don't know what to do. But after hearing you, what you went through, and I can see life different. And she put her arms around me and gave me a hug. You know, I was very young, so I guess I try to push back memories, you know. We were, the same thing, we went into the ghetto in 1941. We were forced into the ghetto. Then in 1942, we went to labor camps in Poland. From there, we were separated from my dad, and my sister, which was 2 years older than me, and myself went to buy cattle cars. We were transported to Auschwitz. And there, I was there practically a year, maybe a little over. And then when the Russians were advancing, they marched us out to a camp in Bergen-Belsen. Well, they marched us out, and then we took trains again. We went to Bergen. Bergen-Belsen was a camp that you didn't even work anymore. You just waited to die, because they didn't feed us. And very, very little, and you were just, people were just dying. And the same thing, fate happened to my sister and my mother. And when you see those piles, I was sitting there at one pile and sitting there. And I wouldn't go back to the barracks till a friend of my mother's came and took me back. Because I said, I'm alone, what for?
Well, my story is actually a long one, because I was born in Moscow, Russia, and my parents had to run away from a communist regime, and we came to Germany in 1930. In 1931, I went to a German school, and I went through all the grades in grade school, and I had many German friends and Jewish friends, and we got along very, very nicely till Hitler came to power in 1933 and introduced the hatred. And in 1940, we were all deported from Germany to make Germany free of Jews. Judenfrei, they called it. And so I went to France. And in France, I was for about a year as a partisan in the forests under the commando of the FFI and General de Gaulle from England. Till we were surrounded by French Nazis and deported to Auschwitz. Then I have been in working camps in Poland, and I also have been in the destruction camps in Poland, and then I came to Buchenwald, and I was liberated by the American army in Buchenwald. And the doctor who saved me, he said to me, "We want you to be alive, and you're going to be my guinea pig." It is the first time I experienced somebody to heal with penicillin. And so here I am.
It was Poland at the time, and then it changed 5 times since. I was 13 years old when they came in, the German army. And then I ran away to Hungary, and I went from Hungary. They put me in camp there. Then they took me to Auschwitz. From Auschwitz, I went to another working camp. And then all of a sudden, the Russian army came in and opened up the camps, and we were free to go. Now, all of a sudden, I found myself free to go and no place to go. And it was pretty rough. You're kind of frozen. You're not human anymore. But you follow and you do the best you can. Right, regardless where we could go, we wanted to register out of Germany. I was there in the DP camp. Now we tried to go, I even registered to go to Palestine at that time. I was rejected. And then it came up, they said they're taking in a bunch of kids. You had to be under 18. You were a day older, you couldn't go. To Canada. So I went to register, and I was lucky, and I got through, and they accepted me. So that's how I came to Canada in 1948.
We want as much as possible to install in the young people the reality was really what did happen, because we were the one who went through. I was 11 and a half when the war broke out, when the Germans came into Poland. And I went through, I was one of the youngest to be in camp, to survive particularly, because if they didn't want to feed a grown-up who worked for the stuff that he ate, for the soup and bread, so certainly didn't want to feed children or people who couldn't produce a day's work. So I was very fortunate. I had fairly easy a job, and with a miracle here and there, I survived. What I tell the students is, I don't try to tell them what happened during the war. They can read this in many books with authors much more that can explain than I do. I tell them what happened to me and what I saw with my own eyes. What happened to my family, that from my whole family, which I didn't count how many, but probably if you take cousins and maybe a distant cousin, was well over 100. I was left with one sister who's 3 years older than me, and my mother's her sister alive. From all uncles, from all aunts, from grandparents, my parents with my father, I was together in different concentration camps because I was in Majdanek, I was in Auschwitz, and I was till sometimes the beginning of 45, they separated me from my father. That was only about 3 months before liberation. And after the war, I got word that he just couldn't keep up one of these marches. Toward the end of the war, they just kept marching, including myself. We marched from Germany into Czechoslovakia to Theresienstadt, where I was liberated by the Russians. One of these marches, he just couldn't keep it up, and they wouldn't leave you just sitting on the roadside, so he was shot. So I tried to tell him what happened to me as an 11-and-a-half-year-old boy, how I had every day to struggle with life, with hunger, with accommodation, no clothes change, no washing, no showers. I had full lice and other insects, and just every day, every hour was a struggle to be able to be alive.
Participating in symposiums for the Holocaust has become one of my biggest work as promised to a dying mother. On my mother's deathbed, she informed me 38 years ago that as her generation dies out, and then mine, people have already started to forget. If I stop speaking about it, if everyone else stops speaking about it, my mother's greatest fear will have come true. People will forget. I was born in the Warsaw Ghetto, in the sewer system. We were there for less than 2 years. We were told, my parents were told that we should escape because otherwise we are going to be, the word trouble came up constantly. Before we had a chance, all of us, to escape, I had twin brothers. I had 2 boys. Both boys were taken away with other children that were playing in the street. And they were all taken away to Auschwitz. They all died. And so I've never literally known my 2 brothers. I have no recollection of their faces. From there, we escaped. some sort of miracle had to have taken place because people didn't escape. My father, my mom, and I made our way to some village where my mom had known some old Polish people. To me, they would be the most righteous of all Gentiles. They hid us in their wagons, and they found out that there was a church that would take little girls or little boys. In my case, I was extremely blonde and very, very white-skinned. And so I could easily pass off as a Polish child or an Aryan child. They took me to the church. On the way to the church, we were stopped by trucks and Nazi officers. They proceeded to rape my mother, with me watching. They beat her with a whip. Her face was covered in scars for the rest of her life.
I'm here for 17 years, for I feel the new generation, the students that are in the theater, that will listen and have listened, we made a difference. The idea was that a principal of a school, Jim Keepster from Eckville, who I shouldn't even mention his name, but that was the truth, took a lot of us by surprise, took a lot of us, and he evoked in us the memories. And how can an educator, how can an individual who teaches the next leadership of Alberta or Canada deny this while sitting in Eckville, Alberta or somewhere else? Tell us who were there, who saw it with our eyes, with our bodies, with our feelings, so our dear ones annihilated, destroyed, killed, murdered, gassed, and so on. And he comes out with a statement that the Holocaust never happened. Well, this took us by storm. And then some of us came out publicly and started saying and started explaining and started telling to whoever would listen. And this, the Holocaust Symposium, which I was associated and have been associated with, is a result of it, so that the new generation, the students, will know the truth. For as I have, somebody wrote this, and I would like to repeat it, I am not a survivor, I am a witness to the truth. I am a witness to the truth. I am a Holocaust survivor. I was with the Germans. I was with the underground. My story is a little different. I pulled the trigger because being in the underground with the partisans, we took some revenge. It's not nice to say. We didn't know, you know, you'd see people, like somebody yesterday said, there was only 5 SS leading a group of 500 or 1,000. Couldn't they jump on him, kill him, and be free? Where were you going to go? Where? Your next door neighbor will give you a way, for a package of cigarettes, will turn you into the Germans. So we, in the long run, also, now I was a youngster, I was only 11, 12 years old, but we were sent on some missions to do the dirty work for the older leaders, and we took some revenge. Revenge is not good, but revenge is sometimes satisfying, because we say never again, no matter at what cost, we will not be led to the gas chambers without a fight.
Oh, it taught me a lot about World War II and all the things that happened. Before this year, I had little to no knowledge of the Holocaust or of what happened to the Jews. I just knew that they were interned, but I didn't have a very in-depth knowledge of what actually occurred.
I went on the March of the Living last year, so for me the biggest impact was to watch the kids' reactions as they saw the video and heard Mr. Zukier speak. You know, just as everything's quiet and hear kids gasp and make side comments to people sitting next to them about how, you know, impossible something like that would be to actually occur. I think it's extremely difficult to stop racism altogether, but it's another step that we can take towards, you know, furthering our understanding of each other, and hopefully it'll help at least the kids who are here today to broaden their eyes as to we are all different, but at the same time we're all the same, we're all human.
When the students fill out the evaluation forms at the end of the program, they always point out that their meeting with the survivors was the most powerful part of the program. They feel that speaking with someone who was there, someone who was an eyewitness, someone who experienced the terrible events of the Holocaust, is something that can only be provided by a Holocaust survivor. And for that reason, the survivors have a very powerful effect on the students, and the students take home the message of this symposium to a great extent due to the effect of the Holocaust survivors' participation. The students learn about the consequences of racism, and therefore we hope that whenever they encounter racism, racist attitudes in our society, that students will not remain silent. The most immediate impact on the students is that they leave the college knowing the details to a limited extent of the Holocaust, the events that occurred in the Holocaust. Most of the students, before they come to the symposium, have heard of the Holocaust, but really are not aware of the facts of the Holocaust. And after completing the symposium, they leave with a pretty good knowledge of what happened during the Holocaust. This is a lesson that I'm sure most of them will remember for the rest of their lives.
Dece taiere, lus ihr lernt,